This is a Jaguar xj6 Series 3. It's a 1979 base model, not the Bandon Plus, and we're going to replace the dashboard wood. You can see how the existing wood is straight grain walnut. It's not burled walnut. And it has ridges where the varnish has cracked. Before we begin, we'll take the battery cable off so we don't blow a fuse or short something out or catch on fire. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the top vinyl piece, which is called the crash roll. It's held in place by 4 screws on the underneath side. We also have to be careful to remove the temperature sensor, which is right over the center of the glove box. That's for the air conditioning system. And then over here, right in the center of the dashboard, is the dashboard light, which has to be removed. So step 1, on the top of the dash, the end cap, there are 2 screws. We'll take those 2 screws out. So we remove those screws, just grab hold, and this pulls right out. And so I'm going to put everything in a little box so I can keep all the parts straight and the screws to go with it, so I know what came from where. I also removed the 4 screws from the underneath side of the crash roll. So here's the light that was on the bottom of the dash. There's a bulb in there. There is no cover. I squeezed these little springs here and kind of worked it out, and then you see the 2 leads. So I'll take those out. Underneath here, the tube, the temperature sensor tube, was fastened in there, and so I'm going to be working on that. Okay, this is the temperature sensor that was up underneath there. It has a rubber, like a grommet, that went through the dash and held it in place. So we're going to be very careful with this that we don't damage it. We're just going to leave it dangle there. Well, that was easy. Once I removed the light and the temperature sensor and the screws, the pad just lifted up, and I slid it out of the car, out through the door, and so it is now off and sitting on my lap. The vents apparently stay in. Well, apparently they're somewhat loose, but they stay in. They just lifted right off, and there are foam rubber around them to keep the defroster air in the right place. So we got the top cap off. Next up is the air conditioning center vent, which is right in the middle of the dashboard. You just grab hold of it and pull it right out. That's all there is to it. It has little spring clamps on it. Next up is the cover for the indicator lights, and you just grab it. I used all 4, got a good hold on it and just pulled it. It comes right off. When you take off the instrument light, indicator light panel, be sure to notice that there's a top and a bottom. Up at the top are yellow on the right and blue on the bottom, and then you come down and the rest of them are red. So when you look inside, you'll see the yellow lens and the blue lens. They go on the top. This speedometer and tachometer, and you just push it in a little bit and twist it counterclockwise, just a little bit. You can see the speedometer is now kind of twisted, and you just pull the speedometer right out and we'll disconnect it and the tachometer. Okay, I unthreaded the speedometer cable from the center of the gauge. the two little black things sticking out, that's where the turn signal indicator bulbs go. Up on the upper right, there's a hole where that's the dash light, the speedometer light for driving at night. And upper left, up over here, that's the connector for the trip odometer reset. Very easy to get the speedometer out. Now it's completely out. Turn and got the tachometer. Just pulled it straight out. So from the top we have a light for the tachometer. That's the red and white wire. Then we have two connectors for the tachometer itself. The top one is a white and blue wire. The bottom one is a green wire. Then we have some more light fittings down at the bottom. So we'll pop those out. The one closest to me is white and brown. The one further back in there is bright green and white with a red tracer. Okay, so next we're going to take off this curved vinyl bumper here. There are screws that we need to get to underneath there. So down underneath here, there are two screws. We're going to take those out. So we get those two screws out, and then this piece slides out of there. Next we have to get this bottom piece off. So next we're going to take off the glove box door. You open it up. There's a hinge with two screws here, a hinge, two screws here, and there are two screws that hold on this slide mechanism. So we're going to take those 6 screws out and the door will lift right off. I'm going to sit with my knees underneath the door to support it so it doesn't fall once I get the screws out. So I'm going to hold it up with my knees and remove those 6 screws. Okay, we got the glove box door off. Didn't scratch it or anything. We're going to set this aside and then we're going to take it apart so that we can replace the door later. But right now we'll just set it aside. We're going to next get this panel off down here. Okay, there was a small screw right here going in from the front. Got that one and this one, and then we were able to work the panel off. It's sheet metal covered in vinyl. Underneath you see there's a fuse box and electrical stuff. So we've got that completed. Take this curved piece off of vinyl covered bump rail off, and it comes off with these screws. This little trim piece just slides off, and there are these 2 screws and on the back side, and there are washers and nuts that you get through from the back. Those are the holes they go in, and you have to get back there and get those nuts off, and then that piece pulls off. Okay, next up here on the top, going straight down, there are 4 screws. There's one on the end. There's one right kind of between the glove box and the vent. There's another one over here on the left side of the vent, and there's one over on the far side. That's holding a metal plate, a metal frame, which the wood is mounted to. We're going to take the metal frame off with the wood. Okay, next, right back here, right behind here, there's a nut. My finger is on a bolt or a stud off of the frame with a nut on it. It's going to take a 1/2 inch wrench to get it back there and loosen it up. Okay, the entire right side of the dash is loose and wiggling, so we're going to work our way over, and we need to loosen or remove this section here. We're going to be careful because the switches are staying in. We're going to remove these 2 screws. We remove those screws, and this leans out, And then right down here, you can see there's a stud with a nut on it. It takes a 5/16 wrench. I used a socket wrench to loosen those up. I'm going to remove them now. We removed those two nuts. Now you can see the entire dashboard is wiggling loose. The entire, from the center all the way over to the right, is wiggling loose. It's also a good time to point out, you need to label everything carefully. So this is the nuts, the studs behind the package tray. There are the nuts and the washers that came off that. So be sure and keep all these fasteners straight. I use little baggies, and that enables me to get it back together with the right parts. Okay, the dash is free from here all the way over to the right. So next we're going to take off the housing for the ignition switch, the housing for the steering column, loosen this, get this to fall down, and then down here, same as on the other side, there are screws down here that will enable this panel to come off and the knee panel underneath here. So we're going to get those off. We'll point out that this molded piece here, we took it off on the other side. We didn't need to get that off yet. That can come off with the dashboard. So we're going to leave this one on. And so we will get all those screws, and then we should be able to see the fasteners holding the dashboard down to the frame, and we should be about done. The ignition switch has a cover on it that you loosen the screws underneath and this pulls off. And same over here for the light switch. It has the cover, and you loosen the two screws. You don't even have to take them off, and you pull that off. Next, we're going to look right down here. Right there is that large bolt that took a 1/2 inch end wrench to get it off. We're going to take that off next, right underneath the corner of the dash. We're now getting close to getting the dash loose and to work it out. So I've covered the steering column and the other parts that might mar the finish. I've covered them with towels to protect the dash as I get it out. Next, we have to lower the steering column down just a little bit. So this is a view underneath the steering column. There are two bolts. They're 1/2 inch socket. There's one, there's the other. We're going to loosen those up and lower the steering column down just a little bit so we can get the dash out. Okay, now the steering column is a little loose, so that's going to give me a little room to get the dashboard out. Next, on these brackets up here, there are 4 of them. That's what the crash pad screwed into from the bottom. I'm going to take these out so I can lift the dash straight up. We now have the dash pulled away from where it was by a couple inches, and right here, this is the air conditioning duct, the side air conditioning duct. Back behind it, it has tape, taping the duct to the dashboard. So I'm going to remove the tape on both sides. That should free the air conditioning ducts from the tube that goes into the dashboard. That tape back there was very, very gooey, 35-year-old deteriorated tape. So it kind of makes a mess. Take it off carefully so that you don't get goo on anything, and then wash your hands real well so you don't get the residue all over every place. We now have the dashboard so it's totally loose. The only thing holding it is the gauges, the wires on the gauges. I mentioned earlier you can work through the speedometer housing to get to those, but instead I got the dash totally loose. Now have plenty of room to work so I can take these connectors off on the gauges and label them carefully, and we should be all set. Well, we got it out. Now that you have the dash out, if there's anything you want to do back there that's normally covered by the dash and the glove box and the kick panel, knee panel, now's the time to do it. Over here, one thing that I learned was I carefully labeled all the gauges, and so I know which gauge has which wires, and I made diagrams. After I got it all out, I discovered it has a connector. So all you have to do, you can hook up all your gauges, put them in the new dash, and then just reach in and connect this connector, and everything will be all hooked up. Much easier to do it that way.